In the heart of a busy modern city where cars never stopped moving and people were always chasing the next success, there lived a very rich man who was known not just for his wealth, but for his generous heart. When the time came for his only son to get married, joy filled his house in a way money alone could never create. Because this wedding was not just an event to him, it was a celebration of love, family, and gratitude for all the good things life had given him. From early morning until late night, his large compound was alive with movement as workers cleaned every corner. Decorators hung beautiful lights that shone softly like stars, and cooks prepared food in great quantity. Food that carried rich smells, which drifted into the streets and made passers-by pause and smile. The wedding hall stood tall and wide, carefully prepared with long tables, clean white cloths, and seats arranged to welcome many people. Because the rich man believed that joy grows when it is shared and becomes empty when it is enjoyed alone. As he walked through the hall, checking every detail with calm satisfaction, his heart was full of hope, because he imagined laughter filling the room, friends and neighbors eating together, and his son sitting proudly beside his bride while music played gently in the background. He did not prepare this wedding to impress people or prove his status, but to gather everyone he respected and loved into one place, so they could celebrate together and remember that life, no matter how busy or difficult, still had moments worth stopping for. In his mind, this wedding was already complete because everything was ready, and all that remained was for the invited guests to come and share in the joy that had been prepared for them. When everything was finally ready and nothing more needed to be added, the rich man called his servants together and spoke to them with confidence and joy, telling them that the time had come to invite the guests, because a celebration prepared in silence is not complete until people arrive to share it. The servants moved out into the city, walking through busy streets, climbing office buildings, entering beautiful homes, and knocking on doors of people who were well known and highly respected. People who had already received notice long ago that this wedding day would come. Each servant carried the same message, spoken with respect and warmth, that the wedding feast was ready, the food was prepared, the hall was waiting, and the rich man humbly invited them to come and celebrate with him and his son. At first, the servants expected smiles and quick acceptance, but instead they began to hear excuses that sounded polite on the surface, yet were heavy with carelessness underneath. One man laughed softly and said he had just closed an important business deal and could not leave his office, because money, in his mind, could not wait for joy. Another guest shook his head and explained that he had recently bought land and needed to inspect it personally, as if land would disappear if he paused for one evening. Another said he had family matters to attend to and promised to celebrate some other time, forgetting that moments missed today rarely return tomorrow. Some guests did not even bother to explain. They waved the servants away impatiently, as if the invitation itself was a disturbance rather than an honor. As the servants moved from place to place, their steps became slower and their hearts heavier, because with every rejection they could already imagine the quiet wedding hall waiting in silence. They could smell the food that had been cooked with care, see the seats arranged neatly for people who might never come, and hear in their minds the music that would play to an empty room if these excuses continued. What hurt them most was not just the refusal, but the way many guests spoke as if the invitation meant nothing, as if the rich man's generosity was ordinary and easily replaceable by daily routines. By the time the servants returned, evening shadows were already stretching across the city, and the wedding hall stood ready but quiet, lights glowing patiently as though expecting footsteps that had not yet arrived. Standing before the rich man, the servants lowered their eyes and explained everything they had heard, repeating each excuse carefully because they did not want to add pain by careless words. As they spoke, the rich man listened in silence, his face calm, but his heart deeply touched, because he now understood that many people are so busy chasing life that they fail to recognize when life invites them to stop and celebrate. In that quiet moment, the joy he had prepared remained untouched, waiting while a painful truth slowly revealed itself, that some invitations are rejected not because they are unworthy, but because the invited believe they are too important to accept them. When the servants finished explaining everything they had seen and heard, the room fell into a deep and uncomfortable silence, the kind that makes even strong people feel small inside. The rich man did not respond immediately because his heart was processing something heavier than anger, something quieter but more painful, which was the realization that generosity is not always valued by those who receive it first. He slowly rose from his seat and walked toward the wedding hall, asking to be left alone for a moment because some thoughts require silence before they can find clarity. As he entered the wide hall, the soft lights reflected off polished floors and neatly arranged tables, and everything looked perfect. Yet the emptiness made the beauty feel almost painful to look at. He walked slowly between the rows of chairs, running his fingers lightly across the clean white cloths, remembering how carefully every detail had been planned, not to show off wealth, but to create a place where people could rest, eat, laugh, and feel valued. Each seat seemed to carry a silent question, asking why it had been prepared if no one was willing to sit there, and that question pressed against his heart with every step he took. He thought about the guests who had refused to come, people who had been given honor long before this day, people who had enjoyed his kindness when it benefited them, yet could not pause their busy lives for one evening of shared joy. In that moment, he understood that rejection often hurts more when it comes from those you expected to understand you most. Standing in the middle of the hall, he closed his eyes and breathed deeply, because disappointment has a way of making people forget their original purpose if they are not careful. He realized that if he allowed bitterness to take root, the wedding would become a symbol of shame rather than joy, and that was never his intention. His heart wrestled quietly between sorrow and wisdom, and slowly wisdom began to speak louder, reminding him that a good thing does not lose its value simply because some people fail to recognize it. The feast was still good, the celebration was still meaningful, and the love being honored that day had not changed simply because pride and distraction had kept others away. Outside the hall, the servants waited in respectful silence, unsure of what the rich man was thinking, because they too felt the weight of what had happened and feared they had somehow failed. They replayed the conversations they had had with the invited guests, remembering the careless smiles, the rushed excuses, and the dismissive gestures, and their hearts felt heavy, knowing that so much preparation might go to waste. When the rich man finally turned and walked back toward them, his face was calm, but his eyes carried depth, the kind that comes from understanding a painful truth without being destroyed by it. He did not speak immediately, but looked at each servant carefully, as if assuring them without words that blame did not live in his heart. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady and thoughtful, not raised, not bitter, but firm with purpose. And he told them that what had happened revealed more about the hearts of the invited than about the worth of the celebration itself. He explained that many people are so full of their own plans that they have no space left to receive unexpected joy, and that comfort can quietly turn into blindness when people believe they no longer need anything beyond what they already have. He reminded them that a feast prepared with love should never be measured by who rejects it, but by who is willing to receive it with gratitude. As his words settled into the air, the servants felt a shift, realizing that this moment was not the end of the wedding story, but the beginning of something greater and more surprising. Looking once more toward the waiting hall, glowing softly in the evening light, the rich man made a quiet decision in his heart that the celebration would not be defined by empty chairs or missed opportunities, but by the joy that was still meant to be shared. He understood now that rejection had not closed a door, but opened a different one, leading toward people who might never have expected such an invitation, yet would treasure it deeply. In that moment of clarity, sorrow slowly gave way to resolve, and the wedding feast, once threatened by disappointment, stood ready to become a powerful reminder that true joy always finds its way to humble hearts willing to receive it. After making his decision, the rich man did not waste time, because he understood that joy delayed for too long can slowly turn into regret if action does not follow wisdom. He called the servants close to him again, and this time his instructions were very different from before, spoken with a sense of urgency mixed with compassion, as if his heart had finally found peace in a new direction. He told them to leave the familiar places, the comfortable neighborhoods, and the respected homes, and instead go into the streets, the familiar places, the comfortable neighborhoods, and the respected homes, and instead go into the streets, the corners, the open markets, and the forgotten paths of the city where people moved through life unseen. His voice was clear as he said that the wedding hall must be filled, not with pride, but with people who would understand the value of being welcomed when they least expected it. The servants stepped out into the evening streets, where life looked very different from the world of polished halls and decorated tables, because here they met people carrying tired faces, worn clothes, and quiet struggles hidden behind forced smiles. They spoke to street vendors packing up unsold goods, to travelers resting by the roadside, to workers whose hands were rough from long days of labor, and to lonely souls who had learned not to expect kindness from anyone important. At first, many people looked at the servants with suspicion, because invitations like this did not usually come to people like them, and some wondered if it was a joke or a trick meant to bring shame. But the servants spoke gently and patiently, explaining that the feast was real. The welcome was sincere, and the doors were truly open to anyone willing to come. Slowly, hesitation turned into curiosity, and curiosity into quiet hope, as people began to follow the servants toward the great house they had only admired from a distance before. Some walked carefully, afraid that they might be turned away at the door, while others came with tears already forming in their eyes, overwhelmed by the thought that someone of such status would notice them. When they arrived at the wedding hall and saw the lights, the food, and the open seats, their steps slowed, because beauty can feel intimidating to those who have lived too long without it. Yet the servants welcomed them warmly, guiding them to seats, offering food, and reassuring them that they truly belonged there. As the hall began to fill, something beautiful happened that no decoration could have created. Because laughter slowly returned, conversations grew louder, and gratitude filled the air like music. People who had never shared a table with one another now ate side by side, united not by status, but by the simple joy of being included. The rich man stood quietly at the entrance, watching faces light up as fear melted into relief, and in that moment he knew that this celebration had found its true purpose. The feast was no longer about those who refused to come, but about those who arrived with humble hearts, fully aware that they had been given something precious. Looking across the hall now filled with life, the rich man felt a deeper satisfaction than he had imagined at the beginning, because he realized that joy grows strongest when it reaches those who never expected to receive it. The empty seats that once reminded him of rejection were now symbols of second chances, and the wedding feast, once threatened by pride and excuses, had become a living picture of grace, proving that when an invitation is offered with sincerity, it always finds hearts ready to receive it. As the night grew deeper and the wedding feast reached its fullness, the hall was now alive in a way it had not been before, because every seat was occupied by people whose faces reflected gratitude rather than pride. Laughter moved freely from table to table, music blended with conversation, and the smell of shared food filled the air, creating a warmth that no amount of wealth alone could have produced. The guests ate with care and joy, not wasting anything, because they understood that what they were experiencing was not ordinary, but a rare gift that had come to them through mercy rather than merit. Many of them looked around the hall in quiet disbelief, realizing that just hours earlier they had been invisible to the city, yet now they were part of a celebration meant to honor love and unity. The rich man walked slowly through the hall, greeting people gently and listening to their words, and as he did, he noticed something that confirmed everything his heart had learned that day. Those who had arrived with humble hearts were the ones who respected the feast the most, because gratitude had made them careful, attentive, and fully present in the moment. He could see it in the way they spoke softly to one another, in the way they shared food without fear of scarcity, and in the way their eyes shone with appreciation for a kindness they knew they had not earned. In contrast to the earlier invited guests who had been too busy to come, these people had made room in their hearts to receive joy when it appeared. As the celebration continued, the rich man reflected quietly on the painful but necessary lesson that the day had taught him: that invitations alone do not create participation, and preparation alone does not guarantee acceptance. He understood now that many people hear opportunities calling them, but fail to respond.